7 o'clock. Thank you, Sean. If you don't know, Sean crows us into order every week, precisely 7 o'clock. And then the next thing we do is Chaplain Lee comes up and opens with a prayer.
Come on and stand to your feet all over the room. Father, we thank you on tonight. We give you the praise, glory, and honor. We welcome you into this house. Lord, we ask you to have your way. Speak through your manservant as he speaks to everyone that's here and those that are on their way. We believe, God, that you're going to reach hearts tonight. We believe, God, that your spirit is going to move fresh throughout the aisles of this place and touch each and every one, that they realize the power that's within them. We ask you now, God, that you will just have your way in the mighty name of Jesus. We give you all glory and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Let everyone say, amen. Amen.
Thank you, Chap. So some of you that have been here off and on over the years know that when I do something different, it's usually because it's a reminder for me to say something different or whatever. And so some of you have noticed that I'm wearing a hat, which I seldom do. And the reason I'm wearing the hat is tonight to let you know that Brian and the Reprieve team need some beta testers for our PON learning management system. So if you don't know what that is, it's an interactive step experience. You have to have an Apple phone to participate this early because our Android product isn't quite ready. But if you want to go through the PON experience the same way someone might have done while they were incarcerated, this product is now going out everywhere in the world, but before it does that, we want people to tell us how easy it is to use, what we should do better. We want to get some user interface, so it's free to you. Brian, where are you? He really let us down, didn't he? So Brian's wife and child are in the back, so you can harass her and get on that list if you have an interest. Any of you interested in going through the steps like we do here in an interactive way and beta testing this product, sign up. It's all free. There are some obligations. You got to spend a couple hours a week going through it. You got to give us feedback, but you know, you can use it with your sponsees. You can do whatever you want to do. It's free to you because all we're trying to do is wake up a world it's time to wake up to, right? All right, so who's here for the first time tonight? A few of you, good deal. So good. First of all, welcome. And second, let us warn you in advance, you're liable to perceive us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. And the primary reason that's liable to happen is we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do here, we've been doing for lots of years, we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? The process described by the authors of this book's been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, yeah? And so what we try and do is show you how to align our testimony with the testimony of the first 100. This book is really just the testimony of the first 100 who recovered and their experience with the first several thousand. So what we try and do is bring them back to this experience and align our experience with it. And to do that, I show you how I find my experience in it, and I encourage you to have your experience with it. And if we both do our job, we share a spiritual experience in this room every time we meet. How many of you can agree that does happen? So for those of you online, they're raising their hands. You can't see that because of the anonymous nature of our fellowships. For those of you in the room, they're raising their hand to signify to you that in 12-step recovery, when we speak of a spiritual experience, we're talking about a sensory experience. You'll feel it. And when you do, I'll know, and I'll call it to your attention. Because we would teach you to talk to you about the power we call God. without giving you a demonstration of said power. The other thing we do here is because we know people come here with sometimes with religious prejudice for various reasons. We don't want you to conflate that prejudice and get in the way of your wellness. So when I say God, they say, because what we're really talking is power to recreate your life found inside you. Does that make sense? All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the conscious walk, steps 10 and 11. And we're going to start on page 83, and we're going to start with what a lot of people, if they've never gone through the process, think are the promises. Have any of you ever been to an AA hall or a recovery hall and seen something on the wall that said, these are the promises? Or even a poster that says, these are the 12 promises. And we don't want to be overly legalistic, but those are not the 12 promises, nor are they the promises. They're simply the 9th step promises. And there's promises and conditions throughout the book, and they're talking about the level of our consciousness at various stages of our awakening. Does that make sense? In fact, you'll start to recognize as you grow in the Spirit that we awaken and fall back into slumber many times each day. So this is a disciplined walk to stay awake more of the time so that we can walk free a higher percentage of the time. Does that make sense? So we're on page 83, and it says, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. So what phase of our development? Yeah, I've learned the practices of 4 through 9, and I am somewhere in that process. And then they said, you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. Halfway through with what? Yeah, there's no wrong answer there. You'll find that the step process never ends. It's all one walk in faith, but we've got to be awake to do it. And so, the goal of 12-step recovery is to awaken, not to remain abstinent. That's a byproduct of awakening. Does it make sense? And so we'll be amazed, which is a big part of our awakening, is carrying this message to others who show us what our old ideas are. Does it make sense? Okay. So it says we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. What's new mean? So it's not going to be previous freedoms or previous happiness. It's going to be something unrestrained, right? This isn't freedom from chemicals, although that was probably unfamiliar to many of us. This is freedom from the bondage of self that I sought in 3. Does that make sense? The limiting thoughts are less attacking as I grow. Yes? So then it says, we'll not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. Why is that? How many of you have learned to employ your past to lift up another? How many of you saw purpose in what you thought waste once you learned that that was a thing? So we don't regret the past, and if we are regretting the past, we need to go back in the step process and find out why, right? I'm not using it to heal, that's why I regret it. Okay, so we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. Think of the words, comprehend and know. That's pretty specific, isn't it? How does one comprehend a state of being such as serenity? How many of you have felt yourself suddenly free as you've grown into this, and more so when you're pouring into others? Have you realized that there's probably all the same worldly things going on around you that had been going on around you, but when you're in service, it doesn't seem that way? So now you can comprehend that state of being, the word serenity. What's it mean to know peace? Yeah, maybe I'm not in conflict in my thought life. Maybe my head and my heart are aligned and I'm not fighting between the two. Any of you ever had that happen to you? I want this, but I know that. Okay. Then it says, we'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. How many of you have learned that and didn't know that's what you were doing? It just started happening for you. A lot of us get here, we don't like people very well, do we? The people we know the very best, us, we've been trying to kill. Right? And so we don't trust much, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, look, I can be authentic with you for the purpose of helping you. And suddenly when I see the relief on your face that I'm not coming here to shame you or judge you, I'm simply coming here to tell you there is one in me who desperately wants to know you. Yes? All right, so self-seeking will slip away. Same experience, right? Doesn't say we'll cause self-seeking to slip away. It just falls off of us when we realize that's not the end game, right? Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. How does that happen? You're getting ahead. How many of you have started to figure out the world's not causing how you think and feel, the people aren't causing how you think and feel, your emotions are painting the situation with how you're already thinking and feeling? You'll learn that if you go to something for a while and think it's great, and then you go another time when you're in a bum mood and it all sucks. I'm never going back. Screw them. Nothing changed but your ideas and your attitudes, right? And so once we learn that, the incentive to stay disciplined in my thought life and reject that becomes greater, doesn't it? It says fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. How's that happen?
We walk through it.
Exactly what Tyler's saying. We walk through it. We walk past it. Instead of running, remember we agreed in 3 that we were driven by 100 forms of fear, self-seeking, self-delusion, self-pity, and we stepped on the toes of our fellows, right? We agreed to that, whether we understood that. And so now I'm not letting fear drive me. I'm consuming fear as fuel in order to get free of me. Does that make sense? And then it says, we'll intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. What does it mean intuitively? Yeah, it'll come to us, right? And then it says, we'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. How many of you had an awakening such as that? You were sitting down with somebody, and you had things flowing out of you that couldn't possibly, it wasn't in your base of knowledge. Right? And all of a sudden it's like, wow, that was brilliant of me. Have you had that experience? If you haven't worked with people, you may not know what I'm talking about. If you have, you will find out that it's like, wow, this is really real, right? And you'll also find, you know why the name of this, someone asked me today, how'd you come up with the name New Freedom? I said, it's a 2-second conversation. One of my partners says, what are we going to call this? We got to get a license. I said, New Freedom. He goes, perfect. You know why? Because I've been doing AA a long time, and we want you to know a new freedom. How many of you went to prison and we didn't exist? How many of you came back and were going, wow, this would have been great if it would have existed when I got out? What part of that thought or effort did you have to put in for that to happen? Does it comfort you to know I didn't put any more into it than you did? I'm as surprised as you are. God is doing for us. So are these extravagant promises? Yeah, Tyler's bringing up, think about the question, because when they ask a question, they want you to go inward. And sometimes in our addictions and even thereafter, we can have a bit of hyperbole about our speech, right? We can over-aggrandize situations. Any of you ever oversell it? So this is a book written to people a lot like me who had a tendency to embellish. None of you had a tendency to embellish? So they want us to think, I know this sounds like nonsense, but we're telling you, we were like you and we're not anymore, and the only difference is him. I know I confuse you when you think I should be pointing up, but no, he's in you. Okay, so they're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. That's a promise. What will always materialize? All those 9-step promises we just read. They will always materialize if we work for them. The thing they didn't tell you is the converse. If you don't work for them, they will always vaporize. So, you know, if you're not feeling too comfortable, then it's time to move your feet. Yes? Okay, so this thought brings us to step 10. Which thought? Those promises, that progressive freedom will always materialize if I work for them. Yep. That's why the chapter is into action, to Jim's point, not into thinking. Okay, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. So if I'm going to continue, when did I start? Does everyone make sense? I'm going to continue to do the practices they showed me in 4 through 9. And I'm going to do it when? As we go along. So you're starting to see the steps are not mutually exclusive. That's why we spend a lot of time telling you it's not a workbook exercise. It's just a walk in faith. But we have these levels of consciousness that make it beneficial to us to continue to seek, right? Because it's counter to the human nature. Does that make sense? And when we tell people about it, they look at us like we got 2 heads. But after a while, that doesn't trouble us so much because I once did have 2 heads, and they didn't look at me at all. I probably had 8 or 9. Any meth addicts here? At least 2, right? Okay. So then it says we vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. So what's the word vigorously mean? As attacking as your thoughts are, that's how vigorously you must pursue this progressive peace. Does that make sense? Any of you know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we just sober up or we just get out and, oh man, I should be so much further than I am. And, instead of just getting our feet under us, seeing what's troubling us, seeing what's limiting us, taking captive every thought, submitting it to the power within. And where am I going to be in 10 days and 10 weeks and 10 months from now if I don't do this? Can you see benefit in that? Okay, so it says, we have entered the world of the Spirit. Notice how that was declarative. So what's it like to have entered the world of the Spirit? Is it weird for some of you? That's why we're supposed to support each other in the fellowships, because these are unusual experiences. Usually when it's quiet, that's not good, right? Okay, so our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. So understanding of what? Effectiveness at what? Do you agree with Sean? Did you gain an understanding of yourself and how yourself manifests when you went through the process? Did you gain an understanding of your brother or sister as they helped you for no apparent reason? Did you grow in understanding of this power we call God when you started feeling the flow of Him in you? Even when you didn't believe, when you professed you didn't believe, but the Spirit's moving in you, isn't that weird? He meets us where we are. You ever hear people say that? It doesn't matter what you profess to be. If you'll do these things, you'll get a new identity. Okay, so this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. So what are they telling us? It's a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty situationally, not what's going on out there, what's going on in me that's causing my out there to disturb me. Does it make sense? So then it says, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When did we learn to do that? Step 4 showed me how my self manifests when I experience fear, didn't it? And then we walk that back. When these crop up, you know why they're chuckling? Because we don't pay attention to the words, and they meant the words they meant, and they said the words they meant. So when they say when, they mean when, not if this should happen to you. It's part of the manner of living. I've got to learn that my thoughts are simply reflecting back to me my moods, my attitudes, and ideas about the world or the perspective I'm in. Does it make sense? So then it says, when these crop up, we ask God, we ask power at once to remove them. So, what am I asking this power to remove? And where do those things reside? In my thought life. So I'm not asking God to change you. I'm asking for power to take off my blinders, how I see the world, right? Another book says, how can you see the speck in your brother's eye when you can't see the log in your own eye? Maybe you should remove the log from your eye so you can better see to help your brother. So it's very old wisdom. Whether you subscribe to that or not doesn't matter, but this is an opportunity to take it out for a test drive. Okay, so then it says we discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. So this is where you got to get it. They're trying to get you to do this on the fly, so you're not always going to talk to another human. If you can sort it out with you and your Creator within, then sort it out and do what's indicated. If you can't, you still got that 5th step practice of putting it out in front of you, and as you explain your situation to them, they'll help you sort it out. Depersonalize the experience. Make sense? And then it says, then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. So, they just told us what the principles we're going to practice in all our affairs are. Did you pick that up? And the reason I know that's it and it's not the long list that came out in the later book is because it was a later book. It was published 15 years later. So when they wrote this, they didn't envision that yet. So the principles we practice in all our affairs are watch, ask, discuss, turn. Does that make sense? All right, and then love and tolerance of others is our code. Love what? Tolerate what? Do you agree with Sean? Separate people from human behavior so you can see how to help. All right, and then it goes on to tell us some more promises, less popular. Don't believe I've ever been anywhere where they were hung on a wall. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. Why do they say sanity's returned? Because I'm not fighting anyone or anything.
Because I'm not drinking anymore.
Initially, that's a good, I'm not drinking and drugging myself to death. I don't feel the need to be anesthetized, but even more than that, all this time that I'm out there fighting with people, principalities, institutions, I'm not seeing them. I'm seeing my thoughts. I'm wrestling with my own thoughts that are selfishly twisted. Any of you get some relief from that and realize, wow, I spent a lot of energy kicking the hell out of me? Okay, so that's why we say sanity will have returned, right? You're reflecting how I'm thinking and feeling. Why did that arise in me? But where's the main problem of the addict center? Where's the power found? So the problem is never outside of us. That's a terrible, terrible thing to wrestle with until we just accept that and realize even when we're badly treated, that's not the main problem. Maybe a problem, I need to get out of that bad treatment, but the reality is if I carry it with me, I'll die of that bad treatment long after I endured it. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we'll recoil as from a hot flame. How many of you, we're coming up on warmer season here in Phoenix, how many of you have accidentally put your hand on the automobile after it's been sitting out in the sun for a while? Did you notice how you just raised your hand off? You didn't need to be cautioned. You shouldn't lean on that car in August. It's liable to burn you. No one had to tell you that, did they? Because you recoiled. They're painting a picture for you. How many of you were drawn like a magnet? Like you could just see someone handing off the dope to somebody out of the corner of your eye driving down the road at 60 miles an hour. I'm talking to my peeps. That's gone. And if you came and put it on my dashboard, I would either not be interested in all or I'd recoil as from a hot flame. This is their experience, guys. It's my experience too. If you haven't had that experience, let us work with you. This ain't about fighting. This is about ceasing fighting. For by this time sanity will return. We'll seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we'll recoil as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. And we will find that this has happened automatically. How many of you were so hyper-conditioned from anxiety and overstress that you just responded instantly, even in the moment knowing I'm responding badly? How many of you have been relieved from some of that, just for some degree? So to react sanely and normally is if I'm in danger, react as if I'm in danger and pull away and assess the situation as opposed to launching forward. Yeah? Yes? How many of you could take great calamity, massive destruction without any problem at all, but let everything quiet down and you're like, what the? That's also not a sane and normal reaction, right? So it says, we'll see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. How many of you have grown to the point where you see people using that poison and you don't feel the need to preach to them and you just know that you know that you know? We're going to do what we're going to do, and you're going to do what you're going to do, and if you ask me why I don't do what you do, I'll tell you. I'll even tell you who does it for me, because that's what I said I'd do in 3. His power, His love, His way of life. The only reason I can have immunity from that is I continue to participate in His way of life. All right, so then it says that's the miracle of it. Any of you get tired of hearing recovery people talk, oh, it's a miracle, coffee's a miracle. There are miracles abounding, and if you made it to here, you're a miracle. Because a whole lot of people didn't survive the road that you just came through. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. The name of this group. What's it feel like to be placed in a position of neutrality? Yeah, unaffected. I don't have to react to everything. My mind will tell me I have to react to everything, but I am not my thoughts today. Sometimes I'll feel like I need to respond to protect you, but I am also not my emotion. Right? The Spirit says, be still. Yes, sir. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. What's the problem? Driven by 100 forms of fear. So as you unwind and unravel the onion, you'll be less and less afraid. And even when fear grips you, you'll remind yourself who you are and whose you are, and you'll move forward. Moving forward fearlessly does not mean I'm not exposed to fear. I'm now consuming fear as fuel. Does that make sense? Think of an airplane flying across the country, turns on the jets, goes off at 300 miles an hour, great heights. When it lands, what's it do? Reverses the thrust. The minute you quit being driven by fear and start consuming fear, it's all better. Yes? Okay. So it does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. So what are the two experiences of fear? Self-importance or self-loathing in all its many manifestations, yes? I'm not good enough or you're not good enough. You're a danger or I need you to think I am. Anyone here ever needed everyone to think you were a danger and acted out in all kinds of crazy ways and then wondered why everyone thought you were crazy? Yeah, we've all been guilty of it, right? Who's been homeless here? How many of you pretended to be crazy? How many of you found out you weren't pretending? Dude, I had a 20-inch cockatoo that barked like a dog. Bright white with an orange crest. He'd start barking, "Where's your dog?" "Right here." "What are you talking about?" "Nothing." Just be careful around him. He morphs. So that's our experience. That's how we react as long as we keep in a fit spiritual condition. So what are they telling us about this fit spiritual condition? We need to maintain it because we don't want to fight anything or anyone, right? Because we realize now we're just fighting our ideas and attitudes. And that's not what a servant does, right? How many of you made it to a court or two on your way here? Did you notice when you were sitting in front of the judge, you were sitting in the defendant's seat and your attorney didn't swap places with the prosecutor? So now you're on the defendant's, the advocate's side. You can't switch places with the prosecutor. No matter how crazy what's going on is, we've got to advocate for our brothers and sisters, right? Okay. All right, so it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. How many of you have had that happen to you? Laurels are just past accomplishments. Have you ever slumbered and then life got hard? How many of you have returned to active addiction? Yeah. So when I made that decision in 3, it was for a lifetime. Continue to use me, right? And as long as I'm moving forward in that process, I'm often being used in ways I don't know. So don't assume you're not doing it right because you're not doing it the way someone else is. This time of preparation for you may very well look different. I watched a lot of people in recovery, just so you know, get new cars and new houses. And by the time I came around, that stuff wasn't on the horizon for me. In fact, I went homeless 3 times in my sobriety, and God maintained my sobriety through it. And I had just gotten my feet back on the ground. And Denise and I were living check to check, and then we met the people that we started this with, and we quit everything, we lost everything, and we told everybody, doesn't matter, God told me set this thing up. And so all of her relatives are going, "What did you find this deadbeat?" And she just said, "No, you keep doing what you're doing." Anyway, here we sit, and the only reason is that when he's ready to promote you, he's going to promote you, and it never had anything to do with me at all, I just wouldn't have made it through that humbling experience if I hadn't been prepared through a more humbling experience. Does that make sense? Because if I stood before you and had to tell you that I had anything to do with this, I'd be lying to you. I'm a witness to it just like you. So we're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol's a subtle foe. How many of you have had that subtle foe? I know if you don't, alcohol's not your gig, but how many of you knew it was not safe to pick up no matter what? How many of you picked up no matter what? So it's patient. We're not cured of alcoholism. That would have been good in chapter 1, wouldn't it? I'm embarking on a new manner of living. Some of you students of that other book, you'll recognize the fact that the revelation of the power within me is invoked by his sacrifice, the blood of the Lamb, and the word of my testimony. And my testimony to an empty room or screaming on street corners isn't what it was intended. My testimony is to you who desperately wants what I have, and it isn't this physicality, it's the Spirit in me. Does that make sense? What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Another time to talk to you about the other thing that's coming out with that step thing is our tech business, Reprieve. And that's what we're going to deliver solutions so we can have interactive communities so that people don't, even if they can't get to meetings and things, if they can't get with like-minded people, they can pick it up on their cell phone where they live, even in their busy life, and they can have meaningful interactions. Because what we've learned is that efficacy is improved by engagement. In fact, there is no efficacy without engagement. Do you know what the stats are for people who just come, get exposed to AA for a little while and then leave? Less than 5%. If you engage them for 28 weeks or more, that stat goes all the way to 70%. Documented after all these years. So we want to meet everybody where they are, and we want to keep them engaged in meaningful dialogue with people who aren't judging them, and see if we don't change the world, because I'm counting on y'all to help us change the world. So then it says, every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. So, how do I carry that vision? You're all looking at me. They tell you precisely how they do it. Does that help? So what they say is, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Notice that the not mine is in parentheses. Do you see that? And the reason that is when you're fully awakened, the delusion that there's a will apart from God's that can prevail goes away. Does that make sense? What there really is God's will and my disagreement with it. Or my misunderstanding of it. Does it make sense? Any of you ever misunderstood what was going on for you, and for whatever egoic reason you thought it was an attack to you? Nobody? Okay, so it tells us these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We're talking to you about the conscious walk. This is disturbing. It's not happening out there. Clear my thinking. Open my eyes. Awaken me. How can I serve? Does it make sense? It says we can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. How many of you struggled with a third step decision and you didn't know how to articulate it, but you're like, I don't want to give away my will? I've heard that a lot of times. We think, I don't want to give away my will. No one wants your will, not even the divine. What we want you to do is get your will aligned with what is and then serve effectively. So you're going to need your will once you're serving. So no one wants to take it. You've probably been willful most of your life. You don't get chairs in here if you weren't. You think that's a character defect. That's the one part of your character we just want to get it aimed the right way. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. That seems like a pretty declarative statement. What have they said? They said much has already been said. What have they said? As we felt new power flow in, they started talking about the consciousness, the awareness of being aware of this Spirit moving within us, yes? And now, as we're starting to really come into our awakening, again, you students of the other book, all authority on heaven and in heaven and on earth has been given unto Him. So you say, well, only God can heal and set free and deliver. That's true, but He's using you to do it. So would it not be better to be awakened while He's got me out in that kind of power so I know what I'm doing? If we have carefully followed directions, see why we do this meeting the way we do it? Because I'll guarantee you there's people who have been in recovery a long time and don't know how precise the directions are in this book. And I'll tell you something else. People hand it to you and say, read this and call me, and no one can read this book on their own. Because it's talking about a spiritual experience, it's talking about a sensory thing that comes over us, we have to be shown. Or we just read right past it like we're reading about something else. Why do you think it says to show others precisely how we recovered is the main purpose of the book? They could have said to tell others. They could have made a video. Not back then. You don't care what I have to say until you see that I have the redemption you would like for yourself. And you'll probably watch me for a while just to see if it's real. You're not going to believe me even when I tell you. Because I wouldn't believe you either. I know where we met. But I can see legit change. How many of you reside here? You guys remember the first day or days walking in here and you're like, this is nuts. What do these people want? This is a cult. And then all of a sudden, within a week or maybe a little longer, you're the guy that's running up to them. Welcome home. Hey, if you need to know anything. Am I lying? This whole thing was intentionally designed to break all that old stuff off of you and let you come into your identity. There's nothing that we do except engage you in loving ways. Yes? Okay, so if we have carefully followed directions, we've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. So now they're starting to talk about that power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction. And they're talking about me receiving it in a more regular flow and becoming dependent upon that than on worldly things. And if you don't believe that'll happen, how many of you were drinkers? Any of you get really hungry but you wouldn't eat because you didn't want to wreck the buzz? As you grow in the Spirit, that stuff may still be attractive, but you're not going to want to wreck the buzz. Does that make sense? But I'm going to have to, there was never enough, and so there's never going to be enough. I've switched my dependence on the one thing that I was born to be dependent on as a child of the Most High. Okay, so to some extent, we've become God conscious. So that's really good. Why we say that? Power conscious. So what's it mean? Aware that I'm aware. There's a power flowing in me that is not of me. Yes? We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. You know the five senses, right? So they say this sixth sense is vital. That's God consciousness. Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowing in, informing my steps, providing comfort in difficult times, and empathy when I'm carrying the burden of another. Yes? But we must go further, and that means more action. You think these guys are slave drivers? Are they just telling you about people who chase the pipe hard, that we got to chase just as hard after that power within. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. You guys get what? I know I've heard lots of detailed explanations of the difference between prayer and meditation. All I'm trying to tell you is a lot of us prayed when we were in a jam, and we never waited for the answer. We told whatever we were praying to what we wanted the answer to be. And we had no idea what it was we needed, because I'm wanting outside circumstances to change, and what really needs to change is in me. I got to get rid of my guilt, shame, remorse. I got to get rid of my low self-esteem around not completing things I start. Yeah? So we shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. When? So we're praying constantly. Any of you know what that means, what that looks like? How many of you have been speakers? How many of you have been preachers? I'm going to tell you something. Chap and I had this conversation today. If you don't know what using prayer constantly looks like, prayer meditation, you've been watching it for the last 40 minutes. Does that make sense? That's why you can feel it, and I can feel you feeling it, because it isn't me. I'm just the vessel, and then it's resonating in you. Okay, so says it would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make definite and valuable suggestions. So we're going to look at the definite and valuable suggestions, and then we'll see if there's something we can do to step up our game, and see if we can't get some freedom even from this encounter tonight. Fair enough? So when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. To Sean's point, how many of you sometimes when you lay down at night you're still angry about something and you're kind of destructively reviewing your day? So the changed behavior is getting the mind right before we try and lay down, and there's some practices. Does it make sense? So the question is, were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? The very same things they told me to look out for all day as I went along, the amount of grace I receive is they know I didn't do it. You know why they know I didn't do it? Because they didn't do it. We're not saints. We're just willing to grow along spiritual lines. The points we've set down are guides to progress. The points they set down are these promised states of being that are detailed in here that people will call promises or whatever. But as you can see, there's promises and conditions all throughout describing the sensory experience of growing in awareness of power in your life. Does it make sense? Okay, so do we owe an apology? How many of you knew you owed an apology, weren't ready to make said apology? How many of you struggled with sleeping or resting because of that? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? How many of you like to solve all your own stuff? How many of you have lived experience that says that's not particularly a good idea in all cases? Sometimes it's so personal because we took it personal and it wasn't personal at all. And so talking to someone else, there's no shame in that game. It's simply giving it to somebody else so I can see in the mirror what I'm projecting. Does that make sense? So were we kind and loving toward all? How many of you have been new in this and we're calling somebody every night? Did they ever ask you how'd you do today? How was your thinking? Ever ask you these questions? Sometimes I've seen people have these questions right by the phone. Were you kind and loving toward all? Yep, kind and loving. Then we got one more question for you. In your thoughts? Right? And not to criticize, to give you an idea that there's more. We've never settled our whole life, guys. That's why we got in the pickles we got in. I just want more. I still want more. And so you got to know there's more to pursue. Does that make sense? What could we have done better? How many of you could get to, I owe an apology I'm not ready to make, but I know how I could have done it better. Does that not give you hope? Because there was a time when you didn't even go that far. Progress rather than perfection. If I can't be honest with myself about those things, I'm not participating in my own release. Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, what we could pack into the stream of life? Why are they asking me that question? They want me to self-reflect. Am I benefiting from this stuff I thought I was doing just to please you? Because a lot of times we come to recovery and someone says, I'm your sponsor. You're going to do this, this, and this. And they go, yeah, sure. I'll be right on it. And then we start to get a little relief. And we go, you know, I don't know. Maybe I could try this thing that I heard somebody say. And am I talking to anyone? Like you didn't buy the whole cow at the same time? So the reality is that's what's going to happen. But if you'll continue to move forward, you will grow into it. And at a point, it will propel you without needing to be told. So, but we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. How many of you were doing everything right? You had this certain reputation of being this great guy, straight up, and then you just did something shady. And you knew you did something shady. And now you're thinking, man, I can't. What will they think of me? And so I go into remorse and morbid reflection. Instead of, hey, we're peers. I ain't your boss. I got nothing but a lived experience. And my lived experience today was I fell into slumber and I treated people badly, and then I tried to cover it up and tell them it was their fault. And now I can't get any rest, and I really need you to help me unpack. And we're so afraid that when we say that to you, you're going to look at us and go, oh, you're not on the pedestal anymore, you sorry bag. But really, 90% of the time, they're honored by my honesty, and they're more than happy to get to feel a little importance by helping me do what I've been doing with them, right? So remorse and shame get in my way of showing people the nature. Why do we call each other brothers and sisters? Because we're in it together. We're under the same attack, but in different ways. And we're not here to condemn, we're here to lift up. And sometimes we must carry the burden of our brothers. How many of you have sponsored somebody and heard their fifth step? How many of you have worked with someone so broken that you're crying because you can feel what's bottled up in them, and they haven't even spoke it yet? Tell me that's not sharing the same spirit. Tell me that's not sharing the healing power. So you see all those hands that went up? That's a shared experience. We need to talk about that. That's why we seek it. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. So I hear people that have an atheist or agnostic thing going on, and anytime we make that reference, why do I want God's forgiveness? I don't believe in him. Okay, I get it, but we're talking about power. And the reason we want forgiveness from the divine is that forgiveness is a divine act. So the human in me doesn't forgive. I might forget. I'll say, I forgive you, but I don't forget, but that means I didn't forgive you. I'm watching your ass. That's what that means. None of you have ever had that? Okay. So when I ask forgiveness in the divine, I'm not only going to be able to be an instrument of forgiveness, but I'm also going to learn from them. I'm going to get my spiritual awakening as a result of my activity to see what's going on in me that needs healing. Because I really can only see what I know unless I access the divine. Does it make sense? So then it says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. So that's a simple prayer, you guys that have religious prejudice. Creator, direct my thinking, especially to be divorced of self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking motives. And the reason you want to grow in that, especially preventative prayers are good. When you're going in a situation you expect to be difficult because in the past they were difficult, pray up. Ask to have that selfishness, dishonesty, resentment removed before you go in and see what happens. And then it says, under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. What's it mean if I employ my mental faculties?
Using my brain is not using my, I'm not the tool. God gave us a brain.
Yeah, I have the right brain. There's nothing wrong with my brain for the intended purpose I'm here. My problem is, if I'm not using it in the way, if it's not working for me, then I'm working for it. And what it looks like when I'm working for it is I'm not good enough, or you're not good enough, or screw this, or maybe they won't see. Someone's going to be a tool. Me or my mind. If my mind's a tool, you may or may not notice. If I'm a tool, you'll notice. So after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. So now they're talking to you clearly. All that preparatory work is to walk in clearer thinking, because the insanity is a lack of perspective, the inability to think clearly, and now I'm cleaning up my thought life and keeping it cleaned up. Does that make sense? Because 90% of everything that happens to you in the world didn't happen to you, it happened for you. And the other 10% probably happened for someone you hadn't met yet. So it's 100%, right? Did you not survive 100% of the crap you went through to get here? It's the old adage, you got to remind ourselves many times each day, I do not know what you're doing, but I do know what you've done. Your will be done. Yes? All right. So in thinking about our day, we may face indecisions. That ever happened to you? We may not be able to determine which course to take. Any of you ever get there? Got more options than you want? Okay. So here's what they say they do. And notice how they're now not speaking in past tense, they're talking about real time, present tense. Here we ask God for inspiration. So God inspire me. And then it comes to them, watch this, it comes to them an intuitive thought or decision. How many of you were baffled, you paused, and then you just moved in assurance, and then took credit for your assurance? So we want to grow in awareness so we realize that's going to happen more and more as we discipline our thoughts more and more, but it's not my power that created that way. Make sense? All right, so we relax and take it easy, we don't struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still in experience and having just made conscious contact with God, it's not probable that we're going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. So they're just telling you it's going to get better, and you're going to rely more and more on inspiration, and you're going to walk in certainty progressively if you'll stay disciplined. Yeah? I'm going to jump from there because I want to hit one point. I want to go to 88, and let me start on 87, then turn to 88 on the bottom of that page. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. So what do we do when agitated or doubtful? Pause. And ask for the right thought or action. The other book says, take captive every thought and submit it to the power within. Does that make sense? We constantly remind ourselves that we're no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, Thy will be done. Notice how there's no not mine there anymore, because at this stage I'm awakened and ready to serve. Now I need to maintain that. Does that make sense? So it says, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. If you don't believe that, how many of you that were running and gunning started coming to fellowship, someone started working with you, talking to you, started unpacking your thoughts, and pretty soon you were going to the job you had, and then you were going to the meeting you had to go to, and then you were going out to coffee, and you're staying up late, and you still made it to the job the next morning. Any of you have that experience? How many of you were baffled by that ability, given your living experience? So that already happened even before you started the process or before you were very far in it. Does that make sense? So we do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. Back to the third step example. It works, it really does. Claim that promise. See you next week.